Hello, I am Sergeant First Class Kenneth Rose. Welcome to Shooter's Corner. Welcome to this edition of Shooter's Corner. Today we're going to talk about the three firing positions: the standing, the kneeling, and the prone position. First, let's talk over the standing. Whenever coaching a position, I like to start with the feet and work my way up to the head. First, Specialist Cleland is going to move into an aggressive athletic stance. His feet are going to be about shoulder width apart, with his non-firing foot slightly in front of the firing foot. A slight bend in the knees and a slight bend in the waist. This keeps his center of gravity forward of his hips in order to control recoil while firing from the standing position. He'll then come up to a high ready position, looking over the sights. Starting at the muzzle, he has a good firm grip on the end of the weapon, as far out as he can get. This allows him to control between targets quickly as possible while mitigating the recoil. His elbow will be aimed out. This helps to control the recoil of the rifle. His firing side grip, he will have a firm, high, handshake grip on the pistol grip with natural trigger finger placement. His firing side elbow will rest naturally at its side. The buttstock will have a deep seat in the shoulder pocket. His head will rest naturally on the buttstock in order to see through the sights. He'll allow the weight of his head to rest on the buttstock and act as a third hand to help control recoil. From this position, he can engage targets or, if necessary, move into another position. Next, I'd like to talk about the kneeling firing position. If Specialist Cleland can find cover or he needs to move quickly, he can move into another firing position. Let's go ahead and move into the kneeling firing position. To do this, he's going to take his non-firing foot and take one big step forward, allowing his firing foot to drop to the ground, placing the knee on the ground. From here, he will move his elbow forward of his firing knee and gain the kneeling firing position. Let's talk about the fine points of the kneeling firing position. The shooter gets into a kneeling firing position because it adds stability and it reduces his target profile. When coaching the kneeling position, I like to start at the muzzle and work back to the heels. As we go through, we'll talk about some of the common errors we see. First, his non-firing hand will be extended as far out as possible on the handguard. The weapon will lay naturally over his non-firing elbow and as close as possible. We want as much skeletal support underneath the weapon system as possible. His elbow will be either in front or behind his knee. We'll never have bone-to-bone contact as it tends to roll around. Once again, we want to get as much skeletal support underneath the weapon system as possible. We can do this by putting the non-firing knee directly underneath the weapon. Commonly, we see people that like to shoot off the center of the body. This reduces stability. Once again, move the weapon directly over the knee. The non-firing heel will be planted firmly in the ground. If you'd like to achieve a more stable position, you can do this by turning the non-firing foot slightly inward and achieving tendon lockout. Moving back to the shooter's head. The shooter's head will lay naturally on the buttstock. This allows him to achieve consistent sight picture, and his head will also act as a third hand to help support the weapon during recoil. The buttstock will be planted firmly into the shoulder pocket. The firing side grip will be placed high with a firm handshake grip with natural trigger finger placement. Moving back to the heel. There are two positions the heel can be planted in. He can either keep his toes planted in the ground and sit on the heel, or he can roll his heel outward and sit on it. This adds greater stability, however, it's slower to get out of this position and move. Lastly, I'd like to talk about natural point of aim. This is a great position to teach it in, as it's crucial to getting consistent hits on target. I like to teach natural point of aim by talking about the little green army men. If you remember the little green army men, they were planted fixed on a base, and in order to aim them at a target, you had to turn them. By doing this, it reduces muscle tension in the shooter's position, ensuring that after recoil, the weapon comes onto target the same way every time. If my shooter would like to turn to another target, he's going to pick up his entire base and shift his body. Cleland, shift to the next target on the left. Cleland, shift back to the right. As you can see, he moves his entire base, not just the weapon. If the shooter would like to adjust the elevation of the gun, up or down, he can do so by moving his non-firing hand forwards or backwards on the handguard of the weapon. One of the best ways to practice the kneeling fire position is through dry fires. By simply getting down with an unloaded weapon and sitting in this position, it will become more comfortable and easier to assume. Next, I'd like to talk about the prone firing position. This is the most stable position and the safest position as it reduces the shooter's target profile to its lowest place. We like to teach getting into the prone position from the standing. We use the pin, post, and sprawl method. First, he's going to take his non-firing hand, extending it out. His firing hand will remain safely on the grip by bending at the knees and placing his non-firing hand on the ground and then shooting his feet back, almost like a burpee. He's now going to lower his body into a prone firing position. I like to start teaching the prone at the muzzle and working my way back to the feet. First, his hand is extended as far out as possible on the handguard. A firm grip will allow him to control recoil. The weapon is straight up and down. Some shooters have a tendency to cant their weapon. As a coach, I ensure that the front sight post is directly up and down and perpendicular with the environment. Moving back, his non-firing elbow is placed on the ground. The magazine. This is a common misconception, and we hear it a lot, that the magazine can't be placed on the ground. Well, it can, and it's a great way to increase support while firing from this position. Malfunctions caused by magazines are simply because the magazines are bad, not by placing them on the ground. His firing side hand is once again placed firmly with a firm handshake grip high on the pistol grip, allowing his trigger finger to rest naturally across the trigger. His firing side elbow is also placed on the ground. His head rests naturally on the buttstock, allowing him to get consistent sight picture and control recoil while firing. The buttstock is placed firmly in the shoulder pocket created when he gets into the prone position. There are two leg positions that can be shot while in the prone. First is the bent leg. To get into the bent leg prone position, the shooter will take his firing side leg, cocking his knee up towards his body. This raises the diaphragm off the ground and allows him to control breathing. If he needs a lower target profile, he can go to the flat heel prone. He does this by kicking both feet out, allowing the heels to lay inward and naturally on the ground. I'd like to cover natural point of aim again. As we talked about in the kneeling segment, think of your shooter as the little green army man. This time, his pivot point will be his belt buckle. If the shooter needs to turn to engage another target, he will pick up his entire body and shift to that target. Cleland, shift to the target to the right. This allows him to achieve natural point of aim, ensuring that the weapon system returns to the target after recoil. This wraps up the 3 firing positions. Join us next time when we cover the 2 main firing tasks.
This was Shooter's Corner. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.